Hello, everybody. It's a full house. Woo. Hi, I'm Kim Heil. I'm the artistic producer and head of casting for the Old Globe. Welcome to the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Insight Seminar for Merry Wives of Windsor. Are Vicki and Carl here? I don't see them. Well, we thank them once again for their sponsorship of this program. We have a very special person next to me. So I'm biased because I love this man. He's a dear, dear friend. And I told him, we're just going to talk, you and I, because, you know, we talk really well together.
Because we can. For hours.
I know, pretty much. We're like, oh my goodness, we have a show. James Vásquez is a resident artist of the Old Globe. He has directed many, many shows here on our stages, including How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Hair,
American
Mariachi, Under a Baseball Sky, Hurricane Diane, Tiny Beautiful Things, so many more.
Rocky Horror Show.
Come on.
Lots of fun things.
Not to mention, fun fact, James started at the Old Globe. We may have shared this already at the previous Insight Seminar as a child understudy back in
1987, 6.
What was the show?
It was called The Boiler Room.
Yeah.
And it was in the Carter, which is now the Cheryl and Harvey Wyatt Theater.
Yeah, and how, and I won't ask you how old you were, but did you go on?
I did go on.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I was 15. But I actually, my first introduction to the Old Globe was when I was 12. Their summer camp at the time was called Camp Orbit. It was for high schoolers only. And a drama teacher wrote a letter and made a phone call on my behalf and said, he's too young, but you should take him. So they let me in for the summer, and it was the summer that Jack O'Brien's Midsummer Night's Dream was out on the festival stage, and Paxton Whitehead played Richard III. So that was my introduction to Shakespeare. I had no clue what Paxton Whitehead was saying. I didn't understand it at all, but I was very aware what I was watching. I was very aware that I was watching somebody special. Yeah.
And wasn't Camp Orbit run by a special someone that some of us remember, Diane Steiner?
Diane, yes.
The dear Diane Steiner.
No, you know, it's I feel really lucky to have such a history with the Old Globe and to have connection to so many parts of the Old Globe. The Boiler Room was the last show that Craig Knoll directed. So I got to be in his rehearsal room and spend time with him. So it was, you know, it was pretty special to get to know him.
Now back then, may I say, you were actually Pedro.
And I'm still.
You're still Pedro.
I'm still Pedro.
But so some of you may know this in the Actors Union, which is why, right? Yes. So in Actors Equity, which is the union for actors who appear on stage, if there is a previous or a member who has a name in the union, another actor cannot then join with the same name, which makes sense. You know, there'd be like 500 John Smith actors. But I suppose...
Actually, no. I mean, that is true, but that wasn't the case in my situation.
Oh, I thought it was. Okay.
It was when I graduated from drama school, I was using my full name, Pedro James Vásquez. And it's the name that I had on everything. I always signed my name with my full 3 names. And when I graduated from drama school, I kept getting submitted and sent out for young gang leader or Jose or Miguel. And then I would walk in the room and they would say, here's some sides for Bobby. Will you read for Bobby? And my father is fully, he's Mexican. My mother is not, and I favor my mom more. So the decision was made at that time that I would drop the Pedro and just use James Vásquez. which years and years and years and years later, I wish I had never changed it. I wish I had never dropped the Pedro. And I use Pedro a lot these days. But the fun story behind it is I grew up for years thinking that James was a great grandfather or uncle on my mother's side that I had never met. I found out when I was like 21. I either just didn't pay attention or they didn't tell me, that my father is a poet, among many, many other things. But my dad signed all his poetry James St. John. So James, they made my middle name my dad's pen name. So it actually was kind of a beautiful thing that my stage name that I led with James, though Pedro. Always Pedro. Always Pedro.
And because Pedro grew up in San Diego, every so often you'll run into people who know him just as Pedro. And then if you start calling him Pedro, you'll be part of that in crowd. So that's a special tip right there. But let's talk about the Merry Wives of Windsor.
The Merry Wives of Windsor.
Now, this is like the James Vásquez show where I'm going to share all these little tidbits that I know about you. So one of James's first professional shows out of school actually was a production of The Merry Wives of Windsor in Shakespeare in the Park in New York. So is this the first time you've revisited this play since then?
Yes. And I'll tell you the funny thing. I played, we started rehearsal for Shakespeare in the Park on the day that we graduated from school. And the public theater excused us from rehearsal for the morning so that we could graduate. And then we had to go to rehearsal afterward, which was kind of exciting. I mean, my family flew in from San Diego, and I was like, "See ya, enjoy lunch." But I had diploma in hand, and I was on my way to my professional day, like literally out the door. I played Robin, one of the messengers. If you're seeing the show, when you see the show, you'll meet Robin. It's a glorious part. There are maybe 5 lines. So when I was asked to, if I wanted to do Merry Wives here at the Globe, and I went back and read it, I was like, that person's in this play? That storyline isn't, it's actually about the wives and not just Robin? But if you ask me, I mean, it was about Robin, the messenger. So reading it was sort of like, okay. Yeah, I like this play. This is fun.
They're only in the title, James.
They are.
Who directed that production?
Daniel Sullivan is a. I mean, you can't get better. There are a handful in the country. Barry being one, Daniel being one,
Jack O'Brien
being.
Darko Trezat. All have been here.
All have been
all
here.
Are here.
Yes. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Barry comes to you.
Yes.
With this idea. Yeah. So what was that conversation?
Yeah, he came to me and said, "So you how much Shakespeare?" And he was one of my teachers, by the way, at Juilliard. Barry directed me and was one of my teachers in classical text. So last summer we sat down. He called me in his office and he said, "So how much have you really kept up on all the Shakespeare and the work that we've done?" And I said, here and there, I have gotten to dabble with some high school students and college students and, little side projects. And he said, "Well, you want to do one?" And I sort of went, "What?" Because just the thought of it was kind of big and scary, even though it was something that I knew. And I had trained in, and I knew that I had one of the best in the world at my access for any questions I had and any support I needed. It was still scary, but probably for that reason and that reason only, I said yes. I said, let's jump. Let's do it. And he said, "Okay, it's The Merry Wives of Windsor." So I actually said yes before I even knew what it was. He then said, "It comes with one little thing," and I said, "Oh, sure." He said, "I think it would be so fun if it were the 50s." And he goes, "Is that something you think you could grab onto?" And I went, "Yeah." And he went, do with it, whatever. But I think it would just be fun if it were in the 50s. So I went away and started thinking, the 50s, what do I know about the 50s? And I immediately went to Lucy and Ethel as the Merry Wives. And then the more I went through the script, I went, oh, well, there's the Fonz. Oh, well, there's Lenny and Squiggy. Well, there's Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies. There's, blurring some lines a little bit, but the sitcoms from that era and sort of the iconic characters that we knew from those sitcoms all felt like they had a place and a home in this story. Now, we're not doing impersonations of those characters. We're not saying that is the Fonz up there, but they were certainly inspirations for us. So it immediately was a world that I felt like, yeah, I think we can have some fun with that. And I took it back to Barry then, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do with it. And everything that I said, I want to turn the Garter into a diner. I want to, I just have fun with it and base it off all these shows and these characters, and really even give the show a little bit of a sitcom feel, Fast and Furious and a little wacky at times. And he went, sounds great. And next thing I know, we're sitting at second preview, and I'm in front of all of you talking about it, and here we are. And it's been really exciting to revisit a lot of those shows and take more inspiration from them, to bring a group of designers into this world who had their own memories from those shows, who had their own ways of inspiration of that time period, and just to get in the room with all these creatives and build our Windsor, which I think is a fun, silly, happy little place to live. And that was our goal.
Yeah. What kind of research? And I ask this because I remember you telling me something along the lines of the number of hours you spent watching I Love Lucy. So tell us what kind of research you had to do.
I think I've seen every episode of I Love Lucy now at least 3 times. I watched all of Leave It to Beaver. I watched the Donna Reed show. I watched the Andy Andy Griffith show. And then some of the shows that were throwbacks to those period that were made a little more recently, like Happy Days. And so I mean that was research, but it was also just a lot of fun to revisit those. And it started to get to the point where it became my background music. I would just put I Love Lucy on in the background, so the sound and the period was in my brain. But there's a moment that you'll see in the show with laundry clothes hung on laundry lines, straight from I Love Lucy. I mean, there's all these great moments from these shows that Shakespeare wrote first, so we're bringing them back to Shakespeare. On top of that, we moved it. Windsor is Windsor, Southern California. So we had a lot of fun in researching the architecture of that period, of the 50s of Southern California, and what the architecture looked like, what the design looked like. Similar with the costumes, just really having fun, and the status level in the costumes and the time period. The funny thing is I always feel like I never do enough prep work. And I've done so much.
You really did.
I mean, we've read the script, we've cut it, we've read it again, we've talked to people who have done it to see how they approached moments. We looked at the period. We talked to family members who grew up, who were teenagers in that period, who could give me even more. But it is always until I have the full company sitting in front of me and I hear their voices actually reading the parts where I think, okay. But up until that point, I think, I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't done enough. And they're the missing piece, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, as someone who didn't grow up with these sitcoms and I didn't watch them regularly, I have almost this fascination of the style of them because it's foreign to me. It was very new, very different. But I feel like these sitcoms that you mentioned, these American sitcoms, capture something quintessentially American that I think then you bring into not just the aesthetic of your show, but also in the telling of the story. And I'm curious if you would happen to have an explanation of what that is, that quintessential quality.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll do. I don't know, but here we go. I think what I really loved about those sitcoms and the period, and again, what I knew about the period was there was, again, from TV and pictures, right? There was a pristineness to the period. There was a crispness to the period. There was a theatricality to the way people navigated, and I think a hope that was there that I always saw, that I always look for, is a hope. Yeah, and it was a period where I think generations in the youth have always said no as they're coming into their own. But this was the time period where the civil rights movement started to take off, where women started very strongly saying, no, I'm not going to, you can vacuum also, and stepping into stepping out of the house and finding their voice. And so I think that all sort of lent itself to a fun theatricality, clean pristineness.
And what I also see is a sense of joy. Like there's so much joy, and something you had said in an interview about the two women. These are not women who are, they are in this world. They are the stay-at-home homemakers, but they actually have a lot of agency. And they are sort of joyful in claiming it. And so there's something about that I thought, wow, Merry Wives of Windsor is not necessarily known as one of his great, plays. But it is actually a rare play in that it demonstrates female joy.
Well, and, he didn't write for women a lot. He didn't write for them. Yeah. And this particular story gives them agency, celebrates them. It celebrates the women. And we are really trying to do that out on the festival stage. And I love that you. I'm so glad you're catching the joy in it, because I think that's from day one, from moment one in the rehearsal room. I said we have to lead with joy with this story. It is a story that I think, with a slightly different direction, could feel mean and could feel like a community gathering, heaping on top of somebody. And that is not the intention of the story. The intention of Our Merry Wives is joy. And it is finding that, finding humor in life and finding that ability to laugh at ourselves again. And maybe trip and stumble a little bit, but get up and brush off and giggle. Yeah.
How true is that story about how Queen Elizabeth loved Falstaff so much that he that she told Shakespeare, you must write a play now about him?
I mean, I wasn't there, but we think we think it's true, right? We've in many sources have said that this is actually the case. The Queen fell in love with the character of Falstaff from the one play that the Shakespeare had put him in, and said, "For my birthday celebration, I would like a play with Falstaff." And he said, "Okay, when is your birthday?" And she said, "In 2 weeks." So he sat down and he wrote The Merry Wives of Windsor in under 2 weeks. And you got to imagine in probably a week, because then they needed time to like put it together, right?
Right, they still had to rehearse it, then tech it, then preview it.
I mean, right? Make cuts, see what didn't work. And here's the funny thing is I will say we maybe discovered some moments where we were like, oh yeah, he wrote this in 4 days. Yeah, he was we were like, oh yeah, because he put that out there and then just never again. And they're truly, like, we've had many discussions, and I think the casts we settled on, but there were moments where we'd be like, what time is it? What time of day is it? And I don't know. Because in one scene, he'll say, oh, at 10 o'clock, meet at 10 o'clock. And then the next scene, at 7 o'clock, but it's the same day. But then the next scene, at 9 o'clock, but it's the next day. So you're like, where are we? What? So he's left a little bit for us to figure out, but I think we did.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so James, you know, in your directing career, you've done a lot of musicals, and there's something about this particular production that is actually quite deliciously musical. It's not, right? They're not breaking into song, but you actually add on almost like a soundtrack, but also, as you'll see, and it's so delightful, this set that moves and the way the actors populate it and move on it, it does feel like choreography, or it does feel like a musical, right? That's kind of reminiscent of like the old classic, movie musicals in a sense. What do you bring from your musical background into something like Merry Wives?
Well, I think every project I approach, whether it be a musical or not, I know that I am attached to the project, and I know that I am attracted to the project if, while I'm reading it, I can start to hear a musicality to the language. And then in my brain, if I start to see staging, and if the staging, staging for me is not just a here, across there, and across down. There's always reason and motion to it. It's actually something I learned from Jack O'Brien. He talks a lot about emotion being swirled and directness being straight lines. And so a lot of my staging is very specific in a very sort of musical way. And I think of, I hear the language as a music of sorts. And this show, Merry Wives, you referred to it as it had a feeling of choreography. It's so choreographed. No, it is, because when you do see our set, our scenic designer, his name is Diggle. What a name, right? Diggle. One name. He created, I told him, I said, I wanted to see the town of Windsor, and I wanted us to feel like we were a community. And so this beautiful, what feels like a giant dollhouse play set that we're on, rotates and has 3 different locations. And as we're moving, you can sometimes see people exiting through the lawn while the house appears. When we're on the lawn, you can see people going up the stairs into the house to look for something. So it's all finely choreographed for safety, really, because there are moments that turntable's spinning and they're climbing up over stairs and moving around. But it was, I wanted us to feel like we landed in this little community and we were a part of it, and we got to see the village live.
Yeah. A technical question, just because I'm curious. Do you come in at the top of a rehearsal day in the studio with your staging already done? Okay.
I do. I call it the roadmap, and I always say our first pass, just let me give us the roadmap, and our second pass, we break it a little bit, and I always say that the best dancer in the room wins, and so if you want to veer off the roadmap, go. But the map is there, so we know how to get back to stay on track with the story. And I will say, Noelle, my associate director, is at the back of the room. Noelle Marion has been with me for, 8 shows? 8 or 9 shows. I try to never go anywhere without her. And this is the reason why. What was I talking about?
Staging,
oh, yeah, the roadmap. Thank you. Yes. But I'll say, I think probably at the end of the day, 85% of the original roadmap is what ends up in the show. And we drive off of it, but we always tend to come back.
Yeah. And do you feel like with the text work of Shakespeare, I mean, musically or in musicals, you have the music and you have the score and you have those. Is it different now that you have this language? And I'm guessing most of it is just verse, not in verse.
Actually, in Merry Wives, it's I would say 85% of it is in prose, and it's only when it gets a little heightened or romantic that we break into verse. But even in his prose, he wrote with such rhythm. It's not he gives you everything you need. It's funny with Shakespeare, with actors in general. I am one. We always got to make it better, right? We always know better than what's on the page. And I gotta say, with Shakespeare, he gives you the emotion you're supposed to play. He gives you the action you're supposed to play. It's all there in his text. And so you trust that, and the music of it will sing.
And then you also embellish the music of it with these fun little, the lingo of the 50s.
Yes. It's, I was like, we said it in the 50s, and we're saying things that are just not from the 50s. And I was like, does it feel right? Does it feel right? And then when Barry, the man who knows Shakespeare better than anybody else, said, throw in some 50s lingo. Change those words. I went, we can do that? And he said, the guy's dead. So we did. And there are fun moments throughout that you'll hear some 50s slang sneak in, just to help land us in the period, and some localization. There are a couple references to help land us in Southern California.
And I know that, so on every Shakespeare production we do here, we have a voice and speech coach who works with the actors, and I would imagine also works with you on meanings of things. And so I'm curious. Her name is Ursula Meyer, and she's fabulous.
She's fantastic. And I mean, what Barry doesn't know, which he does have all the answers when it comes to Shakespeare, Ursula can fill in the blanks. I mean, she truly has a knowledge of the language and the text.
But how did she feel about the 50s language?
It's funny because she is also very much a purist. So initially she was like, you want to change to what? You want to put knuckle sandwich into Shakespeare? And when we got up and actually did our first stumble through of Act 1, she sort of went, oh yeah. And I think because we chose very specific slang, that even the slang sort of has a heightened sense. So I think at the end of the day, it all just sort of lifts and elevates the way Shakespeare intended.
Let's talk a little bit, because this is something that you and I talk about quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the casting of the show. Now, a number of these actors you've worked with before, like Matt McGrath, Jen Harris. So it seems to me, actually, because I kind of know who the people
that I
you go
stacked
to.
the deck?
Yes,
Yes.
right. But I feel like there is a James Vásquez actor. Tell me what you think that is.
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I think I have. I think there are actors that I'm drawn to, and those are ones that don't take themselves seriously. Those are ones that are willing to, I like to say, dangle off the cliff while also living in the truth, so they don't fall off the cliff. And actors who aren't. Who will get silly and laugh at themselves and are playful.
And I was going to also say that the actors that I see you gravitating towards have incredible facility with not just language, but their voices and their bodies. Yes. They know how to move. They know how to transform. That they're incredibly versatile and almost chameleon-like in some ways, because, someone like Matt McGrath can do so many things. Yes. Jen Harris, Cornell. And I feel like there's something about going into a rehearsal hall with James Vásquez that tells the actor, I get to play and transform.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you. No, I hope so. I mean, because that's why we do it, right? I mean, I do it to tell stories. I do it to tell stories and hope that at the end of it, we've affected the audience in some way. That we've either left them with something to think about and have a conversation about on the drive home. In this case, hoping that y'all leave just laughing and having had a good time. But otherwise, it's because it's fun. And what I was doing when I was a kid, they now pay me to do as an adult. Is tell stories and create and play. So I hope that the rooms I create are that.
They are for sure. And I know that the audience is going to come away from it just feeling that sense of joy and play and delight, because I think the show has that in spades. So
can I tell two quick funny little Merry Lives stories? When I played Robin, the messenger in Merry Lives of Windsor, Robin hangs out. He's part of Falstaff's, or he gets pulled into Falstaff's crew. And when I did it in New York, the 3 actors that were hired to play Falstaff's crew were all not American actors. And I didn't know them. I hadn't met them. And we sat down for a first read-through, and we just went around and said, hi, I'm Pedro. I'm Kim. Hi, I'm Joe. Hi, So you didn't really get to know anything about anybody. Then we launched into the reading of it, and all 3 of Falstaff's sidekicks all had accents that weren't American. And I sat there and I was like, oh my God, I'm part of this. I'm part of that. Am I supposed to have an accent? I'm supposed to have an accent. So we get to my first line, and I became Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. I was like, I would rather go before you, sir. And the whole room went. And the director went, you can just talk like yourself. I was like, okay. Then we get to first preview, and on the same line, it was actually the same moment, walking out, and I'm with this woman who's a legendary off-Broadway actress. Like, she was a mainstay in off-Broadway theater in New York. And we're walking down center stage, and I'm convinced that my mic isn't working. But I was like, that's okay. I just graduated from Juilliard 4 weeks ago. I have so much voice and speech training, I can project my voice into this theater. So, and she's right here, and her microphone's right there. And I'm like, I can also just lean in slightly, and her mic will pick me up. So I get out there, and for the first scene, I'm screaming my lines, and she's looking at me. And we get off stage, and she goes, honey, you're wearing a microphone. I was like, it wasn't working. She goes, it was working. She just goes, they heard you in New Jersey. It was working. So,
I love that.
rookie.
I
First
love
gig.
that. I love that. I want to open it up to the audience for any questions. So we have a question right here. And do we have someone with a mic? Oh, here we go. Kevin's going to hand you a mic right here.
I finally remember and miss the sessions on Shakespeare by the dramaturge Diane, where we'd read the whole Shakespeare play before performing it. And I do remember her saying that Shakespeare would often have two contrasting themes, maybe nature and the court, or Gloucester and Lear, and as my English teacher did. So what do you think are the contrasting themes that Shakespeare is trying to illustrate in this Merry Wives of Windsor?
Gosh, it's interesting, again, with it being such sort of a quick turnaround and gift for the Queen. I mean, I think, honestly, one of the big themes was, again, laughter. But I do think there are I do think there are big themes of truth, and how we lead in a truthful way and what we believe, and then the contrast of that, how we navigate through life when we can't be truthful and trust that.
Good. Yeah. And I just wanted to make a comment. I liked your comparison to the road map, and your link with music. I couldn't help think, but that's what Beethoven did, right? He'd get off key and then bring it back again.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That's right. James Vásquez just called
Always
him
off.
Beethoven.
Yeah. I'll take it.
We have a question right here. Sorry, I'm going to lean over you. So sorry.
I love the whole idea of the themes. Do you think that Shakespeare was writing for women, and these two women rule in the play, which is not true in any other play of Shakespeare, I don't think. Right. Do you think that was deliberate?
I do, and I think that was also in part for the Queen. And I think it. She wanted to see Falstaff, but then he also wanted to give her something that I think she could relate to and celebrate. I do want to say that it's still, the Merry Wives of Windsor is still very male heavy and male dominated. That said, we in our casting and even in the use of all the MFA students that we have, we're very female identifying heavy. And so how do we really celebrate those actors and give everybody an opportunity? There are a handful of roles in the show that have been gender swapped, but I was very, very specific about which ones. And it was any character that was written as male that is now a female identifying energy, it has some gripe with Falstaff and has some gripe with how the community is operating, so that it would continue to be the women stepping up in the story and saying, no, we're not going to put up with this.
Yeah, great. Oh, we have a couple of questions right on the aisle here. Great. This gentleman.
Hi, thank you for coming. Were any of your actors old enough to remember the 50 shows?
Yeah, I think yes. Yes. What? One. And then there's a whole pocket of us that saw them in the rerun era, and then there's a whole pocket of them that I had to introduce to. They were like, Fonzie? I was like, come on. Hey! And they were like, what? Yeah.
But aren't those TV shows now on, Amazon or Netflix? Like, are they
Yeah,
available?
but they don't, listen, when you have, they don't watch them. When you've got
well, sure.
4 million things to watch on Netflix, they skip past
but it's
Nick
there.
at Night. But it is there.
Yeah. Oh, Nick at Night.
Friendly
of course,
TV.
Of course. Yes, right behind. Yep.
Hi there. So you talk about changing the language and all of that kind of stuff and adding, 50s vernacular and slang and all that. It's a rather dangerous thing to do with the Bard.
Yes.
Do you find that as a creator and as a director, do you find that it's more fulfilling to kind of live a little bit more dangerously with works like this or other classics, or do you like to kind of balance the danger with the reverential of Shakespeare?
I will always start by honoring the original. Even with I had the opportunity to do West Side Story many years ago, and even with that, there was, when approaching the choreography and approaching some of the style of the show, I didn't want it to just be a remount of all that choreography, but there are moments that are iconic that we want to see. So I think you start with those moments and you then see how your voice fits into that and can live beyond that. And so with this, I mean, and again, even with the changes and the edits that we're making, we're running it up the flagpole to make sure that it's clear, that it's not taking away from the story, and that it honors what the original intent of it was. I think when I think it's selfish when you start to. I think it's selfish if you just start to say, I'm going to change it because I don't like it. There's an intention there that I think we want to put our voices on, but how do we elevate it?
And I would say it's, by no means is he, rewriting Shakespeare. I feel like you pepper it in. I mean,
that's it. I mean, I mean, really, you'll notice it because Knuckle Sandwich is in there. But we're talking like 1.75% of the evening is flavored with.
Yeah, it's just enough to be fun. We have 3 questions.
Kim, it is 7:43, so we might want to.
Okay, so I will take at least one more question in the very back row there.
All right.
And then if it's a quick one, we'll take another question.
What was the key ingredient you were looking for when casting the show?
Oh, gosh. I mean, always funny, playful. Always funny, playful. And I was very lucky in this one in that, I mean, when I joke and say that I stacked the deck, I kind of did. 3 of my dear friends are in the clown roles, and they're funny, funny people. An actor that I went to school with is in the show, so and I look for people who come in the audition process who aren't perfect and who are okay with that. Auditions are interesting, and they're a lot of pressure, so I get it. You want to go in and do your best, but those that then mess up and get so, I immediately think, ooh, gosh. But the ones who mess up and then laugh and giggle and just keep going, I want to play with you. Yeah. And kind.
Oh, yes.
Kind.
Yes, please be kind.
There's no reason.
We have one more question in the back here. Yes.
I had a question regarding the research that you did watching, the episodes 3 times. Yeah. Where did the network censors, there's a lot of censorship, a lot of things you would never see on TV, standards and practices. What sort of effort, what's your thoughts about that?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I mean, you're watching these episodes.
Yes.
And you're aware of all the censorship that occurred.
Yes.
And so we just take that into.
Well, I think, in regards to, I mean, I will say this. I will say, watching a lot of those old episodes, there were several moments where I went, ooh, I don't know that we can get away with that today anymore. And so we were very careful with our production on being truthful while not being harmful. And I think that that's a line we not only have to walk, we want to walk. To not offend. I'm okay with challenging. I think part of my job is to challenge audiences. I think my job is not to alienate audiences.
Yeah. Well, James, thank you for your time tonight. And I'm guessing that you all are going to see the show. So have a good time.
Have fun.
Have fun. Thank you.